It's on. MIDCAMP! What up? Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Advanced Basket Weaving brought to you by the Nerds team. If you're in the wrong place, I apologize. Sorry about that. Drupal 8, security tips and tricks. I have one request for this talk. It's a very targeted talk. Please hold all questions to the end. I love dialogue, but I go through a lot of material. I do it very quick. Okay? My name, Adam Bergstein. I go by Nerdstein in the Drupal.org community. I'm the Associate Director of Engineering at Civic Actions. Lovely place. I have cards up here, a couple stickers. If you want some, please help yourself. I have a Master's of Science in Information Systems and Security from Penn State University. I also do a lot of Drupal 8 contrib work from services, taxonomy menu, password policy key, encrypt, field encrypt, file encrypt, yada, yada, yada. So some of this stuff is pretty familiar to me, and I'm happy to answer questions later if needed. Let's do a little bit of an introduction. There is no secret right now that our community is facing a little bit of a crisis. Would you all agree? We all have a lot of questions, we have a lot of doubts, we have a lot of concerns based on these events. That's fair. We need to seek some common ground, I think, to move forward. Would you agree with that? Yeah. And I want to try to help that a bit here in my talk today. Can we all agree that Nickelback is really bad? Living in a voting ground. All right. That's all I'm going to do. Sorry. We have a lovely community. We truly do. I'm honored to be a part of it or even feel like I'm a part of it. It's really great. There are many people here today and tomorrow at MIDCAMP that are amazing contributors to the Drupal community in their own unique and very special ways. There's a lot of folks, I put their pictures up here because I recognize all of them and they're great, they're amazing, and they are definitely here. You should take advantage of the fact that they are in town. Talk to them, reach out to them, ask questions, learn, do whatever it is that you need to do to make sure that your experience here is great. All right, Drupal 8 is pretty much now about, 1.5 years old now? I mean, I haven't really tallied this very recently, but I think you have to look at this from a perspective of potential. So Drupal 7's been around for however many years now, right? 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And it's where it is today. But imagine where Drupal 8's going to be 6 or 7 years from now. It's got incredible potential. The future, I think, is looking really great. What's the next point? Security is extremely hard, okay? It is very, very, very hard. Why is it hard? It changes all the time. It's constantly evolving and shifting and changing and all these other things. There are new attack vectors that creep up constantly. So this is something you have to do proactively forever, right? What a burden. The solutions to the evolving attacks always are evolving themselves as well, right? Oh, update your modules. You must secure everything. You must secure your application. You must secure your infrastructure. You must secure your users. Oh, that's the hard one. The hardest problems in the security space, they improve security and they don't impact usability. So if you really want to try to find a great solution, it would be one that has this as a primary motivation. Bear in mind that if it's harder for people to use, it's very hard for a machine to exploit it. In the security space, one of the best pieces of advice that I can give anybody is to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. This talk gives a bunch of modules and recommendations and suggestions, but guess what? You shouldn't go off and just install every single module that I tell you. Bless you. You should take consideration and try to understand what the problems is that you face with your site. And then install whatever you think is relevant or configure it the way that you want it. So let's take a look at an overview of what we're going to be covering. Drupal core, some hardening techniques, auditing, authentication, encryption, DevOps, the environment, and I will take questions at the end, believe it or not. Let's take a look at Drupal core. Drupal 8 Core has many, many, many new features that impact security. And if they don't directly impact it, they tangentially impact it. And we'll get to that in a moment. It is very nice. I like it a lot. Let's evaluate a few. Let's take a look. First and foremost, who's my front end people in the house? Woo woo, twig. We now have auto-escaping of variables that are passed to templates. You do not need to worry about sanitizing your templates. Nah, 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 nah. No custom PHP in templates. That's lovely too. Man, I can't tell you the nightmare that I have seen when people put database queries and things right into a TPL file. There is no more custom PHP. Love it. Sign me up. PHP input filter. Bad smells are bad for business, folks. Okay, if you have people coding PHP into nodes, you've got something wrong on your architecture. I'm just saying. PHP filter was removed from core. Yay. That eliminates all these vulnerabilities that are entered by custom PHP code entered through the Drupal admin interface. For the love of God, this just smells terrible. Trusted hosts. This associates your Drupal system with a specific domain. And the great aspect about this is that then your Drupal system can be more protective about what it accepts or what it doesn't accept. So it can serve as a mediation point for doing domain-based checks. And that can help to prevent external spoofing. Cool, right? Cool. New development constructs. This is the one that kind of gets into the tangential territory, but hey, we'll go with it. Plugin systems. Modules can have plugin systems that allow for customized behaviors now. This is fantastic. We will talk about how many of my modules use this feature to be extensible. So you have a tool and you develop said tool. You can then apply that tool for way more diverse cases by enabling plugins to extend or change the behaviors. Pretty slick, right? Composer. One of the big selling points of Drupal 8 is, we're off the island. We're pulling resources from various other open source projects like Symfony and God knows what else. Composer really has enabled that, right? That's kind of been one of the gateways for tapping into these other tools. And modules themselves can do the same exact thing, which is awesome. So because a module is able to tap into other open source projects, we can bring in the best of breed tools in security and usability and whatever, right? Right into our Drupal system. Pretty cool, right? I like it. And it kind of makes us as a community a little bit more well-rounded. Wouldn't you agree? If we're using someone else's tool and we find an issue with it, I think we have a responsibility to give back to their projects too. All right, so I want to thank Core for all of their things that they've done. There's way more stuff, by the way. This is I just kind of skimmed over some of the things I thought that were kind of cool. But if you are interested in learning more, there's many folks that are prominent in the community. Folks like Peter Wolanin. He gave a talk at Drupal North about 9 months ago on how Drupal 8 security has improved in Core. So I would definitely check that out. It's recorded. Let's do some Googling. Hardening techniques. All right, so what is a hardening technique? It's a method that locks down your system and tries to limit or prohibit things for a potential attack vector. And this limits the amount of vulnerabilities that can occur by restricting certain functions or operations of the system. Right? So here's your user, right? Where's the any key? I can't find it. Many of the solutions that we are going to talk about in this talk emphasize securing your users. Oh, man. Why? Because getting access into the Drupal system is quite dangerous. Would you agree? I agree. So let's talk about some ways that we can lock things down a bit. Auto logout module. What is the problem we're trying to solve with this? User sessions should be limited to a specific amount of time. The solution is there is a configurable way with this module to define how long users should be logged in before they are being forced to re-authenticate. Cool. The great thing about this is configured by role, as are many of the tools that we talked about today. And the reason why that's useful is because more privileged users should have a shorter window of time that they are logged in. And you can set that. So that does help with usability. For content editors or things, you might be able to give them a little bit more leeway. Session limit. Problem here is how many concurrent sessions would I allow per user to be logged in at any given point in time. And this is a configurable way to define how many active sessions a user can have concurrently and lock that down too. And again, beautiful thing, configured by role. So if you have admins, maybe you only want to let them have one. Don't let them have more than one, right? That's the thing about hacks. Whenever you get a hack and it gets exposed, it's a floodgate. Start small, it goes big. So having limits like that is wise. Login security. First problem it tries to solve is basically authentication should only be from valid administrative IP addresses. Another problem it tries to solve is the invalid login attempts should be capped. You know, maybe you only want 5 attempts before it locks a user out or something. So the solution here is configuring this module basically to help restrict what's called a brute force attack and provide restrictions based on IP address. This doesn't really work too well if you don't have like a network of fixed IP addresses that you're giving out for people. So this is really not what I would call the most widely used module or solution, but also bear in mind that it does help extend some of Core's flood control mechanisms that it has out of the box. So that could be useful. SecKit, this might be, I would say, one of those modules that could be as close to like install it and run with it that you might find in this talk. It's kind of a Swiss Army knife. It tries to solve a bunch of different problems that relate to the the response headers that go with your site. And the way that that does is basically it tries to inspect things that might pertain to cross-site scripting or clickjacking or request forgery and anything that is driven by origin. It can inspect that from the headers and then basically apply some security measures. So it's pretty nice. Where's my Jeff Geerling at? Is he here? No, he would be happy that I have this here. The honeypot and CAPTCHA modules. So what's a problem? Well, robots can spam the living daylights out of your site, right? You've got public-facing forums. It could be web forums. It could be people collecting data about surveys, whatever, right? And that could generate a lot of spam, especially if they're open to anonymous users. Always best if you can restrict it down to, authenticated users or even by role. But both of these modules at least give you some tools that are available to help to make sure that you are indeed a human before you submit the form, right? The results are in, and you are not human. So let us take a look at some auditing. First and foremost, digital forensics. If anybody wants to make a buck, this is probably one of the hottest fields right now that you can find, right? Especially when it looks to like big data, and collecting tons of logs and analyzing them and all that other stuff. Big stuff happening here. So let's make a few things clear. First and foremost, if you get hacked, I would think, common sense says, that you would want as much information as possible to have at your fingertips to figure out what happened, right? Do we all agree on that? I tend to think so. So the other kind of fun thing about this is basically that auditing tools can also be used in a different way. They can be used to ensure longer-term health and sustainability of your site by running scans. So there's 2 different angles here that we want to try to explore. So what are some general tips? First and foremost, make sure you're using syslog and not dblog. That baby fills up like you wouldn't believe. You don't want to put that crap in your database. It's not accessible to all the different tools that can be exposed that can use your syslog in very intelligent ways. Evaluate all aspects of your system for what data should be logged. right? If you have authenticated users, log the fact that they're logging in. If you have people putting data into the site, make sure you're logging what data they're putting into the site and when they put it in. So just log everything that you possibly can, but make sure that you are logging the most critical business functions of your system to the best of your abilities, even if you have to write some custom code. This one goes out to Mike Ryan. Log all the things. Mike's famous all the things that he loves to push for. Woohoo! Let's look at some solutions here. All right. So first and foremost, a site audit module. What is the problem that we are trying to solve with this module? First and foremost, can my system be scanned and evaluated for, keyword in this sentence, general best practices? This may or may not pertain to security, but guess what? You want to be following best practices. If you're not and you get hacked and you need help, you want to make sure everybody knows exactly how your site is set up. And they could be as quick and as swift as possible to get you the triage help that you need. So this module aims to perform a static analysis of a set of recommended Drupal system configurations, right? This gives you kind of some, hey, maybe you should consider turning this thing off. Good stuff. The beautiful thing about this, which is why I consider it an auditing module, is that it stores these results into the reporting and logging of Drupal itself. The great aspect of it is you can go back and rerun this over time to see if you are improving. The other beautiful thing about this is because it's a contributed module, they are always improving too. So you pull down updates, you get the latest updates that are best practice, and guess what? Boom, you're good to go. You have a nice evolving solution here. In a similar space, we have something called the security review module that does the exact same thing as the one we just discussed, except it is evaluating security-specific things. So the solution here is basically making sure you turn on the module and then you audit over time, try to improve, and follow the recommendations that it makes. So if you want a specific example of a module that tries to give you more data as part of what you're doing, the login history module is a great example of that. Why? You want to try to solve the problem of collecting more information about who is logging into the site, right? The user login is one of the single biggest points of potential failure in your system. So if you look at logging, enabling that module, the great thing about that is it will store tons more information about that transaction. It'll store how they logged in, the IP address, the timestamp, lots and lots of different things, and it's very configurable as well. Beautiful. All right, let's take a look at some authentication stuff. Hopefully I'm not boring you yet to death. Can we prevent attacks by making it harder to authenticate? The answer is absolutely. Does it hurt usability? Absolutely. You will inconvenience your users. They will complain. They will hate your guts. But guess what? The converse of having them be hacked, I would say, is substantially worse and more expensive. So you can take some gripes. I know you can do it. I can't walk in this thing. Sorry, that might be one of my favorites. I had to do that. Okay, TFA. I am a Google Summer of Code mentor. Last summer, we ported the TFA module to Drupal 8 from Drupal 7. Ben Jeevens, awesome guy. If you know him, give him a high five. He's a great security mind in the community. He goes by Coltrane as well. So for TFA, what are you trying to do? How can I add an additional verification step that ensures that my user is who they say they are? The solution is a two-factor auth module. Is a common, two-factor authentication is a common practice basically for trying to make sure that you have more than one step, right? And in Drupal, the TFA module is purely an API. And I'll explain why. There's a good reason. And it has a plugin system that supports many different types of second factors. Because those things can change based on your use case, right? They're not all the same. So let's take a look at one of the plugins. Google Authenticator module is now in Drupal 8, also part of Google Summer of Code. a plugin to the TFA module, leveraging its APIs and plugin system that builds a Google Authenticator right from this handy dandy device that you all have. Can get an access code, add a second factor on your site, and boom, you are donezo. Love it. If you have a desire to basically try to federate your authentication, you have tools like SimpleSAML PHP Auth. And that module was ported by Balaz, who used to work at Acquia, or does work at Acquia, I'm not sure. So Balaz, he doesn't any longer? Okay. Okay, we'll talk later. Doesn't matter. Balaz is a great guy too, so you should meet him. He's awesome. He ported this module to Drupal 8, and basically what this does is it's a replacement for Drupal's login system, right? It gives you the ability to wholesale take it out and drop in something else that might be sitting central in your enterprise of systems, right? A lot of enterprises have authentication providers, things like Shibboleth or whatever, that you can use a tool like this to basically plug in. And the beautiful thing about this in Drupal 8 is that this SimpleSAML PHP authentication is an external library. It's a third-party library. And now we can bring that in with Composer, install it in the module, it's already in the code base, and boom, we are good to go. We are donezo. We're rocking and rolling. Password policy. This was the first Drupal 8 module that I ported. I think I rewrote it 3 different times because I was learning. Man, great experience. Problem number 1, how can I force my users to have strong passwords? Problem number 2, how can I force users to reset their passwords after a given duration of time? Solution, password policy gives you the tools that you can basically do to restrict your passwords by role. It also gives you the ability to extend it with its API. If you have custom roles, a lot of federal governments, clients that we have very specific roles that they want as part of their passwords, right? We can use this module and the plugin system and its API to extend that for their specific use cases. And we always like it when people give back, so please make sure that you're doing that. One such example of giving back is the password strength module in Drupal 8. This is using a library called the, all right, here we go, grounding, XCVBN library. I always screw that up. I didn't this time. Good for me. It leverages Password Policy's API to basically build a rule that is based on this external library. And this is a scoring system. This library is so awesome, by the way. It's great. This is really good for usability. What it does is it takes a password and it runs it against a whole bunch of different filters and algorithms. At the end of doing that, it gives you a score, and it says your password is either 5, really, really awesome, or 1, really, really crappy. Password policy basically gives administrators the ability to say, what score do you want your users to hit? And this is good for usability because they're not having to hit every single role that you define and outline, and da-da-da-da-da. It's pretty cool. I like it. Get the score. All right, let's look at encryption. Okay. Encryption includes 2 primary things that you should be mindful of. First and foremost, it includes data at rest. That is the data that is living in your application when it is not invoked. It's sitting in a database. It's on the file system, right? It also includes the communication channels themselves. It could be communicating between servers. It could be communicating from client to server, right? But all of such things need to be evaluated when considering encryption. And guess what? There are many, 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 many different solutions that impact every single tier of your architecture, from your application to your infrastructure to much more. Let's look at some general tips. My advisor at Penn State always promoted this. The lower the level that you can solve a problem, the better off that you are, because that trickles upward, right? So if you can solve something from your infrastructure, which generally is the lowest level you can, whether that's your operating system or your servers, you should strive to do that. Make use of full HTTPS. This is not as taboo. I think in 7 and 6, people were used to installing the Secure Pages module and then saying, oh, I have a form at this path. That should be secure. I have my login form here. That should be secure. Use full encryption now. This is way better. People expect it. They like seeing the lock in the corner of their browser, right? So just do it. Don't worry about doing the additional configuration. Turn it on wholesale. Let it fly. And then evaluate full disk encryption from your hosting or cloud provider. Why? Guess what? That pushes the problem as low as it goes, and all your data at rest is encrypted. Cool. So let's look at some Drupal-specific solutions. The key module. First, I need a secure way to manage my system and API keys that are in use inside of my Drupal system. The solution, Key provides an API and a set of common storage options for storing and retrieving system keys. The reason why there's an API is because you may want to have a custom way of storing your keys in some other service. There's many community tools that are available that do that extend this module. One that I'm actually writing right now is called Vault. There's a tool from the HashiCorp folks that is called Vault. It basically is secret key management, or secret management, I guess is what they call it, and it has an API. So basically, I'm writing a plugin for Key, calling it Vault, and it handles all the API integration between the two systems. There we go. Encrypt. Encrypt is, I need a way to encrypt Drupal application data, right? So for very highly sensitive systems, you still may want to have Drupal-specific encryption. And the encrypt module does this. This is, again, a very generic module that is just an API. And the API there's many different aspects of it. There's algorithms. And the module itself only provides the utility for taking the encrypt operation and the decrypt operation, excuse me. But the API is really where the magic happens. So what are some encrypt-based modules that have been written in Drupal 8 that extend encrypt? First, we have different algorithms. So we have the Real AES module and the Diffuse module, both of which use external libraries to provide, I think they're AES-based algorithms in Drupal 8. If you want some data management using the encrypt APIs, you have Field Encrypt and File Encrypt. And who's familiar with OwnCloud? Cool. All right. So OwnCloud basically is it's kind of, I think, a file management tool. But one of the really cool things that it does is it has user-based encryption as a scheme. So one of the cool things that we did as part of Google Summer of Code, I had a second project that we built a brand new module called PubKey Encrypt. And that model applies the OwnCloud tools to Drupal-based encryption. Kind of fun. Live long and prosper. DevOps! Okay, here we go. I always need to get my zen whenever I start talking about this. Your DevOps processes are probably the #1 thing that are critical for ensuring that you are being secure and that you are proactively maintaining that security, okay? Let's look at some general tips. First and foremost, use code repositories and pull requests. Make sure that you are doing code reviews and make sure that you are paying extra careful attention and scrutiny to any custom code that gets introduced into your system. I don't want to go as far as to say that you shouldn't review contributed code. In fact, I think that's a great way that you can spot and find issues that you may want to post back in the community. But I will say that people do use contributed modules, and ones that are well adopted are usually pretty well vetted. So maybe you don't spend quite as much time reviewing them. Make sure you're tagging your releases and making sure your releases are actually very small. Right? Because if they're small, you're not pushing big batches of changes into a system and trying to figure out where something broke, right? And if you use tags in your code repository, you can very easily go back and roll back to whatever tag you had before. So definitely do that, and it would be really, really helpful for making sure you're isolating these changes and being more effective. And by the way, update your code regularly. I mean, you know, folks like myself, like we try very hard to keep our modules as up to date as possible. I do have a day job, but you know, we try hard to do that. And I think if you're not updating your modules on a regular basis for your Drupal system, you're not doing your users a good service. So, automation is one of the key ways in DevOps to make sure that you avoid manual mistakes. And there are, I've actually given whole talks on just DevOps with respect to, processes and security and the whole 9 yards. But at a minimum, explore things like Drush to perform some scripts and some automation to make sure that you're introducing some checks and balances inside of your code workflows before your code gets pushed to any production system. I mean, having automation is really the key way for making sure that you have continuous learning in your organization. And anyone that promotes agile concepts is very familiar with that. But you have to have something to start with and improve on if you ever want to get smarter about that. Because automation, man, automation. Coder. So how can we do some automation here? Well, I want to scan my code for Drupal specific best practices. The Coder module will help you do that. Coder ships with Drupal 8 specific PHP-CS code sniffing, right? Drupal 8 specific extensions that check and make sure that all of your code follows the proper conventions. Lovely. And this can be ran during a pull request to make sure that, as your code is flowing in, you can have that checked right when your code is to be reviewed. The hacked module. I want to make sure that core and contrib has not been tampered with, right? This is in turn also a best practice, right? You should not be hacking core and contrib. That's when kittens die. Do you like kittens? Okay, I do. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm more of a dog guy, but hey. So what is the solution here? First and foremost, the hacked module scans all of your code to find things of your Drupal site that, they just seem a little out of place, right? This is especially useful if you're like, say, taking over a site from another developer, right? And you want to get a gut check and see, oh, okay, wait, what's going on with this one, right? That's a good way to do it. Backup and migrate. So a lot of hosting providers provide tools that do this automatically, But if you're not one of the lucky people that has that feature at your fingertips, you may want to consider performing routine backups and testing your backups. Please, for the love of God, test your backups. I can't tell you how many times people think they have a solution in place. They get hacked to death, and then they're like, oh my God, it doesn't work. Did you test it? Please, for the love of God, test your backup solution. Okay, off my soapbox. This module, Backup and Migrate, may give you the tool that you need if you do not have the tools from your hosting provider, because you can run backups of a Drupal solution and you can restore them as needed. Very helpful and useful. All right. Let's look at some environment solutions. So one of the things, I'm not really an infrastructure guy. There's a lot of people that are much stronger, especially in my organization. But I'm going to do my best not to misrepresent them here. Securing your infrastructure, as I actually said earlier, is one of the most important things to making sure you're securing your Drupal system. Some people don't understand that the two are related. People say, well, hey, I want to lock down my Drupal site. Well, you should also lock down your infrastructure. There are many solutions that can mitigate these attacks long before the Drupal system is ever even bootstrapped. And that is kind of cool, right? So what are some general tips? Leverage a multi-environment code workflow. Why am I saying this? Because you should only be pushing the highest fidelity code to production, ever. Code that's been reviewed, code that's been tested, the whole 9 yards, right? Use of a CDN. Now, CDN has performance benefits. That's primarily why people, I think, associate, oh, hey, I want to consider a CDN because it's going to cache my Drupal content and it's distributed. So, people over in this part of the nation can hit that hub. This part of the nation can hit that hub. But one of the things that a CDN does is it sits in front of your Drupal architecture, right? And there are many CDNs now that can perform the same functions as a web application firewall. They can mediate requests and make sure that someone isn't trying to run cross-site scripting attacks against your site. They can check it, and they can block it. So that's a beautiful thing, and a really easy, lightweight thing that you can just install it and be done. If you really want to get fancy, you could look at using tools like Splunk and Elk to do log analysis. So we talked about writing things to the syslog, right? We talked about writing as much data as you can to the syslog. So how do you process that? Well, you process it with a tool like this, because these have log analysis tools that can help you to summarize all of the data that it's receiving and process it and give you nice data visualizations to show you what's going on your site. Pretty cool. Some more general tips. I would strongly recommend that if you're in the market for doing any kind of hosting, cloud is really where you should be. And there's so many different reasons for that, both from architectural reasons of having the environments be a bit more disposable, especially if you get hacked, you can spin another one up if needed. But also from the fact that there are so many security tools that are coming out now by these cloud hosting providers that are great. I mean, they're amazing, and they're innovating way more than standard hosting is today, in my humble opinion. One other thing that you should consider is having a failover environment. So like if you say you are using cloud, you may want to have that hosted in multiple regions. So you can have a primary region, and if that ever drops or fails, you can fail that over to a secondary region. That's a great way to make sure that if you do ever get hacked, you can really quickly spin up and not even have to worry about running a backup. You still might need to, depending on how pervasive the hack was. And oh, hey, I already covered this. Test your backup plans. It's good advice. It's good, worth repeating. All right, some acknowledgments, and then I'll take questions. I promised you that I would take questions. Civic actions. Civic Action stands for three things: openness, agile, and digital government services. Those are the three tenets that we have as part of our organization. It is a beautiful place to work. We're really a very friendly group that care a lot about the community, and we care a lot about our customers and our clients. It's a great place. Really, the culture is fantastic. I would highly recommend you look into it. The Drupal community, we are truly standing on the shoulders of giants. And I showed pictures of many that are here today. We have some wonderful things going on in this community. It can be easy to forget that in the dialogue that's happening in the recent weeks, but we truly do. Let's not forget it. I want to thank everybody at MIDCAMP, all of you, first and foremost. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, all the organizers, other presenters, and all of you for participating. And I did, again, some of my material was motivated from Peter Wolannon's talk on Drupal 8 that was given in Drupal North, and he's given it multiple times. On that note, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take some questions.